They say you can't choose your family. It's one of those tired cliches people use to excuse a lifetime of toxicity. But they never tell you the corollary. You can absolutely choose the exact moment and method by which you dismantle them. My name is Sarah Sterling. For 30 years, I was the ghost of the Sterling Dynasty. While my brothers, Julian and Leo, were groomed in the sunlight, princes of a real estate empire built on the bones of predatory loans and exploited tenants, I was the inconvenient daughter. I was the one sent to distant boarding schools, the one forgotten during summer vacations in the Hamptons, and brought out only for the annual Christmas gala photos to maintain the illusion of a cohesive, perfect family. My father, Silas Sterling, was not a man of warmth. He was a man who measured the value of a human soul in basis points and interest rates. He saw people as assets to be leveraged or liabilities to be written off. When he died 3 weeks ago, my brothers didn't shed a single tear. Why would they? They were too busy salivating. To them, Silas's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a liquidity event. They thought they were about to split a $200 million kingdom, dividing the spoils of a lifetime of greed. What they didn't know was that Silas had one final audit planned. He knew exactly what kind of vultures he had raised. And he chose me, the daughter they had ignored, the ghost they had erased, to be the judge, the jury, and the sole liquidator of his legacy. By the time this story reaches its end, the Sterling name will be worth exactly 0 on the open market, and I am going to savor every single second of the collapse.
We gathered in the library of the main estate, a room that always smelled of old leather, expensive scotch, and the distinct, cloying scent of regret. It was a mausoleum of books no one ever read. Julian, the eldest, stood by the window, checking his gold Rolex every 30 seconds. He was vibrating with a nervous energy he couldn't hide. I knew why. My sources had already confirmed that he owed a private junket in Macau nearly $8 million, a debt that had long since moved past polite reminders and into the territory of broken glass and missing fingers. Leo, the middle child, was sitting in father's wingback chair, practicing his grieving son expression in the reflection of his phone screen. He was already mentally spending his half of the estate, wondering if he could list the Hampton house on the market before the funeral flowers had even wilted. To them, I was just a fly on the wall, a nuisance to be dealt with after the real business was handled. Then the family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, arrived. He looked as though he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't carry the traditional stack of manila envelopes. Instead, he placed a single, sleek tablet on the mahogany desk. Per your final, notarized instructions, Henderson began, his voice cracking slightly, the Sterling estate will not be divided today. In fact, it will not be divided at all in its current state. Julian snapped his head around. What the hell does that mean? The will was clear, 50-50 split of the liquid assets and the holding company. Henderson shook his head. Your father amended the will 6 days before his passing. The entirety of the Sterling Group, the personal properties and the offshore trusts, have been placed into a 90-day discretionary trust, and that trust is to be managed exclusively by Sarah. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it was pressing the air out of the room. Julian's face went from pale to a deep, dangerous crimson. Leo actually dropped his phone. Sarah? Leo barked, a high-pitched laugh escaping him. Sarah doesn't know the difference between a mortgage and a lunch menu. She spent her life in logistics for some mid-tier firm. This is a joke, a senile prank. It is no prank, Henderson said firmly. Sarah has the absolute power to liquidate, sell, or transfer any asset within the Sterling portfolio at her sole discretion. If, at the end of 90 days, she deems you worthy, she may distribute the remains. If not, she has instructions for the total dissolution of the estate. Julian lunged toward me, his expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood. You're going to sign those rights over to us right now, Sarah. We'll give you $1 million to walk away. Don't make this ugly. I looked up at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I didn't feel like the ghost anymore. I'm afraid you've underestimated my mid-tier career, Leo, I said softly. I wasn't in logistics. I was a senior liquidator for the most aggressive bankruptcy firm in the country. For 10 years, I've been trained to find the rot in empires 10 times larger than this one. I don't just know your debts, Julian. I've spent the last week buying them up. I don't need you to sign anything, because as of 5 minutes ago, I don't just work for the trust. I own the banks you owe money to.
I moved into the estate the following morning. I didn't take the master suite with its gold-plated faucets and silk wallpaper. I took Father's office, the room Julian and Leo always called the war room. It was a cold, windowless space, lined with monitors and filing cabinets. This was where the sterling empire was actually run, far from the polished marble of the front office. Julian was the first to try his hand at manipulation. He knocked on the door at 8 a.m., carrying 2 cups of expensive coffee and wearing his most charming big brother smile. It was the smile he used on investors right before he bled them dry. "Look, Sarah," he said, setting the coffee down. "We got off on the wrong foot yesterday. Emotions were high. But let's be real. You're in over your head here. I have a major investment opportunity that's about to close. All I need is a small bridge loan, $5 million, from the primary trust. I'll pay it back with 10% interest in 30 days. It'll make the estate look even better for your final report." He reached out to pat my shoulder, a condescending gesture he'd used since I was 5. I leaned back, out of his reach, and tapped a few keys on the master terminal. "The Macau debt, Julian?" I asked. The air seemed to leave his lungs in a single gasp. "Or the 3 luxury penthouses in Manhattan that you bought using the Sterling Group's employee pension fund as collateral? The ones that are currently sitting at 40% occupancy and bleeding 6 figures a month?" His face went from charming to murderous in a heartbeat. "How did you—" "I told you, Julian. I'm a liquidator. It took me exactly 2 hours to map your embezzlement trail. You've been stealing from the company for 6 years. Father knew. He didn't stop you because he wanted to see how much rope you'd take before you hung yourself. And per the trust guidelines I've established, I have issued a formal demand for repayment on all your personal assets to cover the pension shortfall." "You can't do that," he screamed, slamming his hands on the desk. "I can, and I have. You have 48 hours to return the $5 million you borrowed last quarter, or I begin the public liquidation of your private assets. That means the Ferrari collection, the vineyard in Napa, and your stake in the sports team. If the money isn't in the trust account by Friday, the repo men will be at your door before lunch." He didn't just leave the room. He practically fell out of it. I watched him on the security cameras as he sprinted to his car, fumbling with his keys. He wasn't the crown prince anymore. He was a cornered rat, realizing that the sister he'd ignored for 3 decades was the only person who knew exactly where all his bodies were buried. Leo took a different approach. He was always the diplomat of the family, the one who navigated the social circles of New York with ease. He didn't come with demands. He came with a vision. He arrived at the estate 2 days later with a bouquet of my favorite lilies and a folder full of architectural renderings. "Sarah, darling," he said, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Julian is a lost cause. We both know he's a gambler and a thief. But you and I, we have the Sterling vision. I want to talk to you about Sterling Plaza. It's the crown jewel of our portfolio. If you sign over the management rights to me, I can double the valuation in 12 months. We can cut Julian out, settle his debts for pennies on the dollar, and run this dynasty together. Just the 2 of us, the way it should have been." I looked at the renderings. They were beautiful. Gleaming glass, green spaces, luxury retail. Then I pulled up the structural audit I had commissioned 48 hours prior. "Sterling Plaza is a death trap, Leo," I said, sliding a thermal imaging report across the desk. He didn't even blink. "Every building has its quirks, Sarah. It's industry standard to manage maintenance costs. This isn't maintenance, Leo. You used special purpose vehicles, shell companies, to hide the fact that you bypassed seismic retrofitting requirements 3 years ago. You pocketed the $12 million safety grant and filed forged inspection reports with the city. That building is currently insured for $200 million against structural failure, isn't it? That's your exit strategy. You're waiting for a minor tremor to bring it down so you can collect the insurance and walk away from the lawsuits." Leo's mask of charm didn't just slip, it shattered. He looked at me with a cold, naked hatred that made Julian's screaming look childish. "You have no proof of that. The inspectors I invited for an all-access tour tomorrow morning will find the proof, Leo. I've already turned over the internal emails between you and the shell company contractors. You didn't just put the company at risk, you put 3,000 tenants at risk for a bonus." I watched him struggle to breathe. He looked like a man who had been underwater for a long time and had finally realized there was no surface to reach. "If you do this," he hissed, "the Sterling name is finished. We'll be in every headline from here to London. You'll be destroying yourself along with us.
The difference, Leo, I replied, is that I've spent 30 years living without the sterling name. I'm comfortable in the shadows. Are you?
By the third week, the atmosphere in the estate was suffocating. Julian's assets had been seized, and the news of Leo's building discrepancies had begun to leak to the trade journals. They were desperate men, and desperate men do predictable things. At 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, the silent alarm in the war room tripped. I didn't call the police. I didn't even get out of my chair. I simply turned off the desk lamp and waited. The door creaked open, and two figures silhouetted by the hallway light crept in. They were carrying heavy-duty shredders and industrial lighters. They thought that if they destroyed the physical ledgers Silas kept in his safe, the audit trail would vanish. They thought they could burn their way back to a fortune. I flipped the switch on my desk lamp. They both jumped as if they'd been shot. "The safe is empty, boys," I said. Julian was holding a crowbar. Leo had a canister of lighter fluid. They looked pathetic, two grown men trying to commit arson in their childhood home. "Everything you were looking for has been digitized, encrypted, and mirrored on a server in Zurich. You could burn this entire house to the ground, and it wouldn't change a single decimal point on your debt." "Give us the password, Sarah," Julian growled, stepping forward with the crowbar. "We aren't leaving here without them. You've had your fun. You've shown us you're smart. Now let's be a family and fix this." "Family?" I asked, a genuine laugh escaping me. "Family is what we were when I was 12, and you told the police I stole the jewelry you had actually sold for drugs, Julian. Family is what we were when Leo told father I was unstable, so he could take my share of the education trust. No, we aren't family. We're just three people who happen to share a predator's DNA." I turned the monitor around. "But since you're here, father wanted to give you one last message." I played a video file. Silas Sterling appeared on the screen, looking gaunt and skeletal in a hospital bed, but his eyes were as sharp and unforgiving as ever. "Julian, Leo," Silas's voice rasped through the speakers. "If you are watching this, it means you've already tried to rob Sarah. It means you have failed to show even a shred of the character required to hold what I built. You are vultures who tried to eat the carcass before the heart stops beating. Sarah is the only one with my iron. If you can't prove your worth in 90 days, she has my full blessing to leave you with nothing but the clothes on your backs. You aren't heirs. You are just failed investments." Julian collapsed into a chair, the crowbar clattering to the floor. Leo just stared at the screen, the lighter fluid leaking onto the carpet. They hadn't just lost their money. They had finally been told the truth by the only man they ever feared. They were nothing.
The final month of the trust was a whirlwind of activity. I didn't sit on the money. I didn't hoard it like Silas had. I began a process I called the Great Unwinding. I sold the Sterling Group's predatory loan portfolios, the ones that targeted low-income families, to a national nonprofit for 10 cents on the dollar. The nonprofit's first act was to forgive every single cent of that debt. I took the luxury residential holdings and converted them into permanent low-income housing trusts, ensuring that the buildings Leo had neglected were finally brought up to code and made affordable for the people who actually lived in them. I wasn't stealing the money. I was using the sterling fortune to pay for the sterling sins. By the 90th day, the $200 million empire was a hollowed-out husk of its former self. There were no yachts left, no penthouses, no offshore accounts. Julian and Leo came to the estate one last time. They didn't come with flowers or threats. They came in a taxi because their cars had been repossessed. They stood in the foyer, looking up at the grand staircase where I stood, waiting. "Sarah, please," Julian whispered. He looked like he hadn't bathed in days. "We're living in a one-bedroom apartment. We can't even get jobs because of the headlines. You can't just leave us like this. We're your brothers." "I'm leaving you with exactly what you gave me for 30 years, I said. My voice didn't waver. "I'm leaving you with silence. I'm leaving you with the opportunity to find out who you are when you don't have a billionaire's name to hide behind. You wanted the sterling legacy? This is it. The legacy is the debt you owe to the people you hurt. I've just ensured that the debt is finally being paid." "You're a monster," Leo spat, though there was no fire in it anymore. "No, Leo, I'm a liquidator, and I've just finished the most successful liquidation of my career. The sterling name is officially bankrupt."
You're free now. Go be whoever it is you were meant to be." I watched them walk out the front door. They didn't look back. They walked down the long, winding driveway of the estate they had once called theirs. Two small, broken men, disappearing into the fog of a world that no longer cared who their father was.
I walked through the empty halls of the Sterling estate for the last time. It was strange how small it felt without the weight of Silas's presence. The furniture was tagged for auction. The art had already been shipped to the museums Silas had once snubbed. I went back into the war room one last time. I didn't take the silver or the documents. I took a small, battered leather book from the bottom drawer of Father's desk. It wasn't a ledger. It wasn't a list of bank accounts. It was a diary Silas had kept in the final months of his life. I sat on the floor of the empty office and read the final entry. "Sarah is the only one who survived me," he had written in a shaky hand. "Julian and Leo are just reflections of my own greed. They are weak because they never had to fight for anything. Sarah is the only one who won't be corrupted by the bold, because she's the only one who knows what it feels like to be without it. Give her the matches, Henderson. Let her burn the house down. It's the only way to save her from becoming like me." I realized then that Silas hadn't chosen me to punish my brothers. He had chosen me to save myself. He knew that if I had inherited the empire as it was, I would have become the very thing I hated. By giving me the power to destroy it, he gave me the power to walk away clean. As I drove out of the gates, I saw the sold sign being hammered into the lawn. The estate was being turned into a public park and community center. The sun was setting over the trees, casting long, dark shadows across the property, where a dynasty had once stood. Karma isn't a shadow that follows you. It's a fire that you carry inside until it's time to light the match. It burns away the lies, the greed, and the pretense, until only the raw, honest truth remains. And the truth is, I've never felt less like a Sterling in my life. And for the first time, I think that's exactly what Silas wanted.
They say the truth will set you free, but they never mention that it usually starts by burning your life to the ground. If you enjoyed watching the Sterling dynasty collapse, you're in the right place. This was the Bloodline Audit, one true story of many, where the bill finally came due. This is Karma Speaks. If you want to see more empires fall and more ghosts take their revenge, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We don't just tell stories here. We document the exact moment balance is restored. Like this video if you think Julian and Leo got exactly what they deserved, and comment below with the word audit to let me know you made it to the end. I'm Sarah, and remember, the books are always being watched. I'll see you in the next one.